Jai Guru, everyone.
Very good.
Tiger.
And welcome to Chapter 11, Part 3. And we have the whole A team here today. Priyank, Mike, Chris, and myself. And they are waving for those of you that can't see them. How are you all today?
Good, thanks.
Yeah, ready for the next part of the chapter. And we'll delve right on in. So they've just had this amazing meal, haven't they? This feast that was obviously provided by God through someone else. And they come outside and it's a really hot day, it's merciless heat, and they take shelter under this kadamba tree, which apparently is quite revered in India, if I'm not mistaken. And it's got links with Krishna and Radha, and so they're sitting under the tree. And then Jitendra, bless him, he comes out with it again. He's just beside himself now. And he's saying, you got me into such a mess. And, the lunch we just had, it was only accidental fortune, which I found quite surprising. I don't know if you did, but it wasn't just, someone gave me some lunch. It was a full-on royal banquet. And now he's saying that it was just good fortune. What do you make of it, Mike?
Especially Jitendra, who was just crying, right? He was crying that he was so doubtful and that he didn't believe in God. So now he's back at it. And I find that surprising how quickly he changed his attitude there again.
You know what it makes me think to search is the stages of the heart, which Sri Tishwar said about from memory, I can't recall. Dark, propelled, steady, devoted, and clean. And I just wondered, it's easy for us to say in hindsight, we know what the outcome of this is going to be, and why didn't they have more faith, and so on and so forth. But depending on what stage of development, say, of the heart and the clarity that you can maybe see reality at, in the moment, Maya is very, very strong. The delusion is going to be very, very strong to compel you to think one way or another. So certainly it maybe tells us something about the stage of development that Jitendra has compared to, obviously, the young Mukunda. But I can't say that I'll be in any different state than Jitendra. So, I empathize with him.
I think you'd be a bit better, Chris, from experience. But it's so fickle, the human memory, in terms of its receptivity and memory of grace. When you receive it, you're awestruck and full of devotion, and then 2 hours later you'll forget that experience, and then you'll cross the road, you'll stub your toe, and you'll start cursing everything, including the creator, and you'll be like, and you have to remind yourself where you are. And Jitendra is obviously not immune from that as well, as it would appear. Do you feel sorry for Jitendra? Because he represents the plight of many of us. No, we forget. We don't remember the grace every second of the day. And if you did, I'm sure you'd be self-realized right now.
The word feel sorry for, take pity, these kind of things. I sort of wrestle with a little bit, because this is God's creation. Everything is perfect in its place. So I think, yes, at some level, but beyond that, it is the journey. It's what makes it interesting, right? The struggle. So yes and no.
The reason I say it is because there's a chant which makes me feel sorry for Jitendra in this respect, which is they have heard thy name. And the chant goes, they have heard thy name, the blind, halt and lame. And then part of it goes, those who are in despair, to whom will they turn? So there's a few elements in that chant. It's a really moving chant, and it makes you feel sorry or empathy, not just for all those that haven't got devotion and haven't found God or unwilling to meditate, but also yourself, because you also oscillate in and out of those also oscillate in and out of those realms. But that chant is not often played in our centers.
I think Jitendra played exactly that role that you just mentioned, Priyank. Otherwise Mukunda could have done this alone by himself, but he needed Jitendra by his side to have otherwise it would be all too magical. You would need someone who has like, maybe he's caught a bit more in delusion and it happens easier for him to just forget that the hand of God is going to feed you and have this trust. So it puts the miracles that are happening here into context.
Yeah, in that respect, I think Jitendra is a good companion in this trip, because what would we really have learned if there was an ideal devotee next to him? If Sister Gyanamata, 10-year-old was with this 10-year-old Gyanamata was with him, and she was just, completely filled with devotion and just following him around and with complete faith, and then there's nothing for us to glean, is there? But here we see the yo-yoing of Jitendra. But when I initially put this question when I was reading this section, I was initially going to say no, I don't feel any. It's just, as Chris said, I don't feel it's part of God's creation. But since having reflected on it in the last few minutes, I do feel sympathy for him.
Yeah, I think the word that you used there, empathy, is very, very, it's essential, isn't it? I think Yogananda has talked about that having empathy for others, and being living through the heart, as it were, is very, very strong, good for your development spiritually. Yeah, generally speaking, pity and these things might be separate to my mind.
On a side note, I'm going to ask you a question now. Let's see how much homework you've done, and if you know the answer, don't say it straight away. But there's a word here, and I'm going to pronounce it. Mike, you probably know the answer. Without a single pice between us. So don't Google it. What does pice mean? So no one, not even Mike. You should know, surely. You went to India. That is how you spell the word paise, which is coin or money. So he's saying without a single coin between us. So the three of you just read this and moved on. Come on.
Before we began today, I was thinking, I need to look up that word pice. And then it completely went out of my mind. And this is what happens when you don't listen to your little inner whispers. You get asked on air by Priyank, have you done your homework? No, Priyank, I hadn't done my homework because I didn't listen to my intuition.
in your defense, I think you probably got the gist of it without knowing what that exact word was. Yeah.
But well done for testing us, Priyank.
Keep coming, don't worry. They'll keep coming.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Was that a hospital pass test, would you say?
Yes.
That's
So is it an English word, or is it a particularly Indian word?
It's a Hindi word, which spelt in English spells pice, but it's pronounced paise, or P-A-I-S-A, that kind of spelling. That's what it should be, but that's how it's spelt in English for some reason.
And going back to what we were talking about, forgetting the blessings of God and all of that, I was thinking about that this week, and I was kind of reflecting on how easy it is to remember in memory what happens to us with the divine favors, but actually living the lesson learned is another thing, isn't it? It's it changes you in that moment, but then how long are you going to hold on to it for? And I feel like that's part of the forgetting, isn't it? It's it's not just the memory part, it's the being memory, if that makes sense. And Guruji, he says this because Jitendra sort of saying, how are we going to get back to your brothers, and how are we going to see the sights? And he's just saying, well, you forget God quickly now your stomach's filled. Now you've had that, and How short is human memory for divine favors? So it seems to be a very common thing.
I think there's the saying, right, that in memory everything seems a bit more positive than it actually was, but it also takes away this when you, like, I remember there's multiple times in my life where I thought, oh my God, I prayed to Guruji, something happened, miracle, amazing. And then later I remember it, and then I have to remind myself, yeah, this was because Guruji made this happen, right? Because this part kind of fades away slowly in memory. So maybe not as fast as the Jitendra here, but over time, when you think back, you don't remember this. Striking.
Yeah. All the more reason to journal, because then you'll, and especially if you just journal, even if you don't have time to journal much, you can just journal those specific moments in your life, and you'll still, I'm sure, fill a book quite quickly. But yeah, the other thing, I think there's another good lesson in here where, he says you forget God quickly now that your stomach is filled. You can apply that teaching not just to food, but often, and this is the case for me as well, you'll only turn to God, or I started to turn to God when I was in despair, when life wasn't giving me what I wanted, or in my case, relationships were exceptionally troubling. And then you think, no, this misery isn't what life should be about. And then you try and dig a bit deeper. Well, this is what I did, dug a bit deeper, and then found out God had more, filled me with more satisfaction and relationships and more of the mundane aspects of life, which is what I'd pretty much up to that point in my life when I was 17 invested everything into. But I suppose that's the part of growing up and turning to the spiritual path. I remember, Lauren, I can't remember if you were there, but Mark at the center was, and two other people were discussing after the monks' visit, or during the monks' visit, when there was a little break in the courtyard. They were discussing, how did you come to path? How did you come to the path? That common conversation that you have. And I was just in and out of the conversation. I just wanted to be really quick, and I said, I literally said, yeah, my life was pretty miserable. I turned to God, and the rest is history.
Like, I remember it.
Oh, you were there?
Yeah, we were sitting on the benches, weren't we, outside? Yeah.
And I was like, wow, couldn't have summed it up better if I had like an hour to, but somehow it just came to me.
Short, sweet, and concise, as ever.
Yeah.
It's a skill. It's a skill. So yeah, we have this little moment with Mukunda and Jitendra, and I have to say I had a giggle when I read the next bit, because I find their relationship really amusing, because it's not like they're very to the point with each other, but it's not without love. It just is how they are. So Guruji said, you're forgetting God really quickly without being accusatory, but just sort of saying it how it is. And Jitendra, bites back with, I'm not likely to forget my folly in venturing out with a madcap like you. And then Guruji goes, be quiet, Jitendra, and this is kind of back and forth. And then Guruji says, just basically trust in God, and the same God that has done all of these things for us will make what we need to happen come to pass. And I love that faithfulness, that complete sincere certainty in God. And I feel like that's another lesson for us as well, isn't it? It's like, even when life doesn't outwardly appear to be going as we wish it to be at any point, that God's here just the same, and he's gonna fulfill our every need. And he does in this case, because literally at that moment, he says that a man approaches them rapidly, and he says, oh, you two must be strangers here, let me be your host and guide. And apparently Jitendra just goes really like sickly and pale. Yeah, Priyank.
Just about that point, sickly and pale, and he says, scarcely possible for an Indian to go pale.
Yeah.
Which is, I can fully agree with that, because so many times I've been very embarrassed or upset that you wouldn't be able to tell by like blushness of my skin color or anything. So it's like a advantage and a disadvantage, because if with a lot of people, if you say something offensive or embarrassing, you can just look at their skin complexion and you can see that exactly, Chris. You can see that you've stepped on some toes, but with me that is not the case. I'm going to say it's an advantage, because you can have your cards very close to your chest. But the other cool thing here is he says that a slight young man of pleasing countenance. Pleasing countenance is obviously always relative, isn't it? Who you found pleasing in countenance may not be so to the person next to you. But Guruji says pleasing, so that means that there was a attraction to him in some way, and we know, of course, that he later on declares himself to be a disciple. So this initial attraction would therefore imply that they recognize each other, or he recognized him, or they have a past connection.
Yeah. But interestingly enough, he declines him, doesn't he? He says, no, thank you, which I found interesting. I didn't know why, because I thought, well, surely Guruji would have known that was the help at hand, and I didn't know if he was kind of doing it as a joke because he knew Jitendra was, sort of pale and beside himself, or whether it was a bit like the train, where he just sort of was testing the waters and really making sure it was God and not just any old person, as it may be a lot of people coming up to you. Who knows, Mike?
Yeah, I think he really had to make this person explain why he wants to help him, because that even makes it more of a miracle. I mean, at this point, it's more than just a miracle. It's just that you can clearly see the divine interfering everywhere here in this story.
And it declining the offer of help is in keeping with most of the narrative since they left Ananta to take up this challenge. And it makes, as Mike said, it makes what's about to unfold even more spectacular, as opposed to if he just said, yes, you're my disciple. Then the story isn't as beautiful as it is in this present way. So it's quite nice that it must have been quite not offensive, but hurtful, a little bit painful perhaps, to hear your guru initially say no. But again, that's probably a test, isn't it? Are you persistent? Do you have faith, even though you may have a small knockback at the very beginning, or in our case, many knockbacks in the beginning when we're venturing out on the spiritual path and approaching the guru?
Yeah, I also feel like there's some sort of discernment required as to when and whether to say no to help, because this chapter with Guruji saying no a lot reminds me of the story he tells about the drowning man. And this man's out at sea and he calls to God, help me, save me from drowning. And then a boat comes and says, let us help you. And he says, no, I'm waiting for God. So off they go, and then another boat comes and he says the same thing, and then eventually, cutting the very beautiful story short, he drowns and dies. And then when he goes to God, he says, why did you let me die? Didn't you hear me? And God says, well, yeah, I sent you help, but you said no. So it's a fine line, isn't it, when to say no, and when to know when God is actually extending his hand. But yeah, in this case, it was for a good cause, because, well, as Priyank said, Guruji was then revealed to that he was this person's guru. So when he says no, the person says, well, surely you're not. And he says, why? And he says, well, you are my guru. And this is such a big moment because it's the first time we know of that Guruji's been approached as a guru. And that's massive. This comes before the visions he has at Sri Yukteswar's ashram of him becoming a guru and going to America. This is before all of this. And this is someone who's saying, who's coming up to him and saying, you're my guru. And not just that, he goes on to say, that Krishna appeared in a vision and he showed two people under a tree, obviously Guruji and Jitendra, and one of the faces was yours. And he says that often I have seen it in meditation, which is massive because we know that Guruji also saw Sri Yukteswar in 1,000 visions, as he said. And it's massive, isn't it?
It is massive. When he said, you are my guru, so many movie scenes came to my mind, when there's like a big line and it's like superbly delivered, and then like the whole audience is floored, because this is a flooring line, isn't it? And especially delivered by a book, which and when a book can deliver such a powerful line, then it's a good book, or that you're really, really, really into the book, as we are doing this project. But yeah, you're right, Lawrence, because later on, when in this sentence, when he says, I've seen you in meditation, when this stranger says that, and Mukunda, then he's obviously seen his guru in his meditation. So this would have touched more than a nerve. It would have been a spiritual jolt, a reminder of his purpose, of his promise, the promise that he would have made this disciple perhaps in a previous life, to essentially deliver him from delusion. And that promise also applies to all of us, of course.
Now imagine what impression this made on Jitendra. He who kind of knew Mukunda from this time in the Dayananda ashram and didn't really see this side of him yet. And now he must have had his mind blown a few times.
So Mike, we can ask you, seeing as you in this narrative, two penniless boys in London, when we did this play in the social hall of the London Centre for that event all those years ago, fundraising or something. I can't remember what it was, but I believe you played Mukunda, Miranda played
very humbly, yes.
Yes, and you borrowed one of my cream kurto tops, Indian tops, and you played Mukunda. Remember, you dressed in the shawl and that Indian attire. No, you don't remember? And you had
yes, I do. I still have that top. Yeah,
you wore the tilak, like Krishna.
Yes.
Yeah. So sandal paste. Yeah. But anyway, so Miranda, when she said, as Jitendra, when she was crying and all these kind of things, or like when she heard this other devotee saying that you're my guru, how did you feel?
Powerful.
As Mukunda, because not only did you read it, you actually enacted it, and when you enact it, you have to go a lot deeper than just reading it, don't you?
I know where your question is going, because it will be explained later as well what kind of responsibility it is to be a guru. But as it must be also something that fills you with I don't know what the right word is, but definitely surprised, because you don't know this person, and then also there must be some part of your. I'm pretty sure it didn't happen with Mukunda, but imagine you're like not a realized soul, and then somebody says, "Oh, you're my guru," then your ego goes like, "Okay, I have it." But I don't think this is the case here.
I think someone said it to me once, and they were probably taking the royal.
Kriya, how did you feel?
I thought they were taking the royal Mickey, so obviously I did not give it any the attention that it deserved.
lesser person might have believed him. And that's
Maybe someone with a bit more ego, yeah.
But that wasn't the case here, obviously, with Guruji. But just before we go on to his response, I loved what this man said. He said, "What joy if you accept my humble services." And it reminded me of what a joy it is to serve Guruji in whichever way he asks. And it is truly a joy. And, you know, if we do it humbly and just kind of lay at his feet, yeah, it popped out at me as we were just talking about it. But Guruji is very humble, and he replies that, you know, he too is very glad that this man has found him. And he says, "Neither God nor man has forsaken us." And, you know, he said he was motionless, but he was smiling at the face before him. And then he said, "An inward obeisance cast me at the divine feet." So, you know, he's always giving it back to God. It's never about him. It's always, okay, well, I'll give it to you.
This obviously monumental responsibility that he's just accepted with, you know, quite readiness, quite ease, a lot of ease and simple readiness. He, as you rightly say, he gives it back to God. But how, you know, he does it straight away. He doesn't like accept him and then later on in his meditation say, you know, this person's thanking me, but obviously he's thanking you. But he says he does it. He has that feeling straight away. What a sincere and humble thing to do. Because this is new for him, isn't it? This is new. This is new ground, as you said, Lauren. So it's just so beautiful to see how he's seeking guidance for this new phase of his life straight away from God. And we know that's a theme for how he has led his life through his life, even after his moment of cosmic consciousness or nirvikalpa samadhi.
You know, this interaction speaks to, you could say, the highest possible relationship that we could hope for, the relationship with the guru of all relationships that there might be, the relationship with God and guru. And so this is one of the highest, you know, types of relationship and the interactions of it. But I was wondering, to a lesser extent, maybe, have you guys ever experienced this in your own life where you've met a person, had a relationship with them in any sense that you felt that was compelled by God? And maybe you could argue that all relationships essentially that, but any sort of synchronicity moments, because it's nice to kind of cast your mind back on that. Like Mike said earlier on, you can think of at the time, like, feel some presence of God and, you know, have a moment that you can forget about quite quickly. And you said yourself, you know, Frank, you can go stub your toe and kind of forget about these things, you know, quite quickly. But have you guys had these moments? Because I remember one that a couple of us here connected with, Frank, you gave me in London one of the supports for the technique. Do you remember?
Yeah.
I was traveling around and didn't have one, and you managed to get one for me. And on the same day that you gave it to me, a lady came up. It was at the initiation for Kriya. I think the next day, a lady came up to me and asked me, you know, picked me up from nowhere and said, "Hey, do you know where I can get, you know, one of these supports? You know, I can't get one anywhere. I have no idea." She was foreign. I think she was Polish. She, you know, was struggling to kind of find a ways about London and things like this. And I said, "Yeah, I've got one here. You can have it." And it was just one of those moments that it was such a beautiful moment that God sort of had connected the dots between us all. Yeah. And it's just nice to pause and remember those moments.
That is something similar. There's a lot of, I consider all of the relationships that I have with everyone at the centre, the London Centre, to be, what's the word, inspired, you know, by my devotion for God and gurus. And so I consider them all to be quite important relationships in their own way, even though I'm not close to 90%, 99% of the people that I serve with at the centre. but it still feels like they're really significant relationships. And in India, we say Guru Bhai or Guru Ben, which is like not your actual brother, but your brother through your relationship, through the Guru, or your sister through the relationship through the Guru. And they're such fruitful relationships, aren't they? In a way that ordinary friendships tend not to be. And even if I don't spend that much time really with many of the people at the center, but still those simple, or those little moments that you do have seem to be a lot deeper than a lot longer that you may have with your other friends that you've had since childhood or whatever. I remember once quite a while ago, I like to donate through direct debit through to organizations as opposed to giving every day or every time I see them. So I was giving a donation to this temple near me, and by direct debit. And then one of the volunteers phoned me saying, "Oh, thank you very much for your donation. Is there?" No, they phoned me saying, "Oh, is there a Priyanka around? I've got this number." And I said, "No, there's no one by that name here, but there is a Priyank without the A." And he started laughing. So we had quite a good relationship. And then he said, "Oh," he invited me to a gathering, and then in that gathering I met like 10 other like-minded souls, and I've established such a good relationship with those 10 people just through this unlikely set of circumstances that led me to them, because that's not my spiritual path, but it doesn't mean that you can't associate with those people. So what I'm trying to say, God and Guru does do like guide you into really meaningful relationships, and as Chris's pertinent question was, it does. It's really rewarding when it happens, and when you recognize it. It was quite a selfless thing that you did, Chris, that day. Well, I must say, when you really gave away something that you yourself needed. It wasn't like an iPhone. It was something that was going to help you in your meditation. The armrest.
Well, I realized it wasn't actually me giving it, essentially.
Nice.
I was just the messenger.
Still, Chris, you allowed it to happen through you. You could have easily not. So, yeah, it's inspiring to hear those stories. It kind of makes us think, well, how can we be more like that in our own lives? So, yeah, often we're inspired by like how people are rather than what they try and tell us to be. Yeah. Which is what's so inspiring also about this divine book, right? Because it's not Guruji telling us what to do, it's him sharing his experiences with us and the experiences of others, and through that, well, I mean, I wouldn't be where I am now if I didn't read the book. So, anyway, I love for the book be an entire podcast in itself. We digress. So we have this individual, this man, who we find out is called Pratap Chatterjee. But before we find out his name, he asks if they will visit his house, and Guruji just tells him that that he's already a guest of his brother, and then he asks him if they'll tour Brindaban with him, which of course he says yes. Priyank.
Very quickly, so he asks him if he'll visit his house, Pratap. And then Guruji essentially says it's unfeasible. But the deeper metaphor here is you wouldn't ask your guru to come to you. You have to go towards your guru, right? So that's something that I think is embedded in there. And so Mukunda may have wanted to, or may have been able to, because he may have lived 2 doors down. But he, the relationship of the guru disciple is a certain way, and it's a way it is that way. So it, enhances and makes possible the growth of the devotee.
Just quickly about because Pratap also said Lord Krishna appeared to him. And I find that, like, this started all as a bet between Mukunda and his brother, and this turns into this big story that you even get Krishna involved, playing a part in this. And there's another story that we'll talk about later, I believe, where Lahiri Mahashaya calls on Babaji just to impress his friends, and then Babaji is a bit upset about this. But here, this is completely different. It's like it's all planned out. This is a bet, but maybe it was in the divine plan that this has to happen like this, and all the saints and everyone is playing along perfectly.
Yeah, yeah. And something else that just struck me is that the tree is significant, isn't it? Because it's linked with Krishna, that specific tree, the Kadamba tree. So the fact that Lord Krishna appeared in Pratap's vision, and under that tree, the tree that's linked with Krishna, was his guru. It all just ties together, doesn't it? Wow. Yeah. So anyway, when Guruji says no, I can't come to your house, then he asks, well, let's talk Brindaban. So he says yes. So they hail a horse carriage and off they go. They visit the Madana Mohana temple and Krishna shrines, and it was night before they'd finished their temple devotions, as Guruji puts it. Yeah.
The Madan Mohan temple is that one, and I was there a month ago. Very beautiful temple. A lot of the temples. So if you go to Vrindavan, the common greeting, or even the glorification of God, is Radhe Radhe. So if people are waiting in a line, or if you're going past someone that you might say Radhe Radhe. Or if you're waiting in a very, very long line to enter this temple, then you might say Radhe Rani ki Jai, which is the Queen Radhe. And they don't say Krishna Bhagwan ki Jai, because this is essentially the glories of Radha here are quite famed. These childhood locations of Krishna, because when Krishna left, he never actually looked back. When he left his household after his brahmacharya, and he, took up his mission after his moment of realization, Radhe took up the she took the Ras Leelas, and she carried on. So another story of that is after his realization, he didn't play the flute again because he couldn't dance with the gopis and his devotees, but Radhe took up the flute. So we don't say Krishna Radhe, we say Radhe Krishna. She's really, really glorified. And there's I'll put a link to this. There's a very nice bhajan that I attended, and the singer, who's quite famous in the Hare Krishna circles, she spent the first 20 minutes just singing about the various glories of Radhe. So like she would say Radha Gopinath Radhe, Radha Govinda Radhe, Radha Madan Mohan Radhe, which is one of these temples, Radha Gokulananda Radhe. So all these, she spent 20 minutes singing just about Radhe. And we obviously know, we have our spirit and nature, Radha 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 Govinda Jai. It's not Krishna 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 Jai. That's in fact in the SRF chants, there's no mention of the name Krishna anywhere, but there is Radhe. So that chant is important for us. So there's lots of temples that are in Vrindavan. One of the one that's got the most charm, I would say, because Madan Mohan means charming, actually, the one who's charming, and it's a very beautiful temple on a hilltop. And all these temples have essentially had their deities removed over the thousands of years that they've been there. But one thing that has stayed is something called a shaligram. So all these very old temples have shaligrams, and shaligrams is this archaic form. It's like you know what those shells called that have got the swirls. It's like a shell with a swirl in it. So there's a manifestation of Vishnu where he took up the form of that shell and that shellfish. And so what they say is some of those forms actually still contain the energy of Vishnu, essentially. So these shaligrams are really, really powerful. So the ones in this temple, the famous temples, have got the really, really potent shaligrams, and a lot of tantra and other devotions happen to enable seashell. Yeah, thank you, Chris. A lot of devotions happen to retain the energy. So there's that. But where was I? I've lost myself. It's such a magical place. I really, really do recommend that you go there. One of the places there is where Radha and the gopis, where they would have the Ras Leela, which is the dance with Krishna. And so it's essentially, it's not a temple, it's a field of tulsi trees and other trees. Maybe the kadamba tree is there, and the tamal tree maybe is there. Oh no, my Krishna is blue. That's one of the chants. That's it's in got Krishna in there. Anyway, yeah. So it's just a field of trees. You walk around, and you have to walk around bare feet. So essentially, you're taking part in the Ras Leela, even 5,000 years after it's taken place. So it's a very beautiful, very stunning place. So much devotion. And the other really important temple is a temple called Banke Bihari, and in that temple, the significance is that it's just one deity. Usually when we have Krishna temples, we have Radha and Krishna, but this Banke Bihari temple, which is the most most revered one, I'd say, amongst the locals, it's many hundreds of years old, is because of the devotions of the one of the chief devotees of that area. Krishna and Radha took up one form and brought about that deity. So it's the only temple probably in India where both Radha and Krishna are represented in one deity, one statue, which is very unique. So it's a very, very popular temple.
You're very blessed that you've got to go around them all, Priyank, and see and be there within the vibration of it all. It was so far away in England and London with the busyness of the cars and that. So they'd done their temple devotions, hadn't they, in the book, and Pratap goes to get sandesh, which is like a Indian sweetmeat. And I like this little detail that Guruji gives. He's describing that Jitendra and him were sauntering along the side street, and that now it was comparatively busier now because it was cooler. And then it made me realize that, so when they were going around the temples, it was probably not very busy because of the midday heat. So they probably really enjoyed their time in the peace and the less crowdedness of the temples, perhaps. Anyway, so Pratap comes back and gives him the sweetmeats, but he also says, "Please allow me to gain this religious merit." And he holds out some rupee notes and 2 tickets, which he just brought to Agra. Yeah, Rick.
Yes, this sandesh, Indian sweetmeats. This is a significant thing about going to Indian temples. You'll see all the locals, they will offer a very local sweet. They'll take it to the temple and offer it there to the deity there, and they'll even pay like the Brahmin, the Pandit, to take it right up close to the deity, and then it will be more sanctified. And then they'll take that home as prasad, or they'll distribute it there and then. And so that's a very common occurrence in most of the Indian temples, most especially the ones that are quite important. And different temples have different offerings. So, for example, I went in January, and it was very cold. So it's like the winter month, and sesame is really good for tackling cold in Ayurveda. And so they make a lot of sesame based sweets, and they'll make a very like a massive variety of them, and each local part of India will make it their own way, and they'll offer that. And if it's like Holi, then they'll make these like pastry things. If it's Janmashtami, they'll offer like a milk-based thing, like rabdi or something like that. And if it's Diwali, then literally anything goes. Every single sweet meat that you can come up with or can make yourself. So Diwali is the time for every single type of sweetmeat that you can possibly make in India. But yeah, so every part of India that we went to like specialized in a specific type of sweet, and that was the one that they would offer to the deity or the most important temple there.
I wonder if they offered any when they went round. Who knows? Yeah, I'd just like to highlight this part at the end. So when Pratap comes out and he's got money, he's got tickets, and Guruji says, the reverence of my acceptance was for the invisible hand. And it's highlighting that God helps us through others. I mean, this has happened throughout this entire chapter. It's not God coming down as Krishna or Babaji or anything like that. It's God working through people, and Guruji thanking God through them. And yeah, it's really special when it happens, isn't it? It happened to me a lot when I was in America, and you never really forget it. And in some ways, this happens often throughout life, doesn't it? God helps us through people. And I think this is just a nice reminder to, in those moments, thank God rather than that person specifically, but also, noting that, they've been a channel, obviously, for the divine.
I really, really love these two lines. The reverence of my acceptance was for the invisible hand, scoffed at by Ananta, had its bounty not far exceeded necessity. It's like some lines that can apply to most of our lives, isn't it? Most of us have got more than we need or could want, but we tend to forget that in all our ever-increasing desires. But that is certainly a fantastic reminder for me. And red highlighter, had its bounty not far exceeded necessity.
I wonder if there was an important message, what you just mentioned, Priyank, in the whole story, that if you don't rely on begging, but on the divine hand, that you won't just get what you need, but a lot more. And that message was conveyed to Jitendra in this story, definitely, and then he will probably pass it on to Ananta. That this was not just he passed the test, but it was a home run for him at the end.
Chris, did you get a home run and get 3 armrests after you gave away your 1 armrest when you had 0 armrests?
The bounty of God's grace was far more than any resource that I could have been rewarded with. So
Bitcoins it was, wasn't it?
Yeah. I also feel like this chapter's a nice reminder as well to rely more on God and less on ourselves. As I don't know about you, if you've ever had moments where you've had to rely completely on God, or but in those moments, He really does hold us, and more beautifully than we could have ever imagined. As we've seen in this story, He didn't just give a meal; He gave an entire royal banquet, and He didn't just give Guruji and Jitendra someone to help. He gave them a disciple to be of service, and it's just a whole lot of wow, isn't it? Yeah, Chris.
I think I've said before, but I'll say it again. One of my favorite sayings is, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Yeah.
It is to say,
yeah.
That's not to say don't make plans, but it
Mm.
is, there is a grace in surrendering to God's plan for yourself.
Mm.
When I was in India just recently, the plan was to go to every single location that I could that was related to the Autobiography of Yogi or Guruji's lovely life, and there were some places that we couldn't go to, like for example Garpur Road, because it's not owned by YSS or SRF, it's owned by the family, and you have to book an appointment and all that kind of stuff. So, but when we got there, we'd already seen a lot of beautiful things, and we'd had a lot of grace. So, for example, we'd spent without even planning it, we'd spent Christmas in Ranchi ashram, and we'd got to go into the Puri ashram where Sri Yukteswar was later on, and obviously we saw all these things in Vrindavan and Mathura. So we'd had a lot of grace, and my wife was like, "Oh, we didn't get to go to Guruji's home." And I said, "No, we've had a lot." And I thought to myself, shall I pray for this right now? Considering how much I've received already, most of SRF devotees wouldn't have been able to do all those things that I've done just in those 2 or 3 weeks. I said, no, let me reserve my prayer, because there's bigger there's bigger things to pray for. So I said I need to reserve all my prayers for getting into Lahiri Mahashaya's house, because I've already stepped the soil where Sri Yukteswar had been, and where Yogananda had been. So I need to really focus in on, because Lahiri Mahashaya's home is also one that you can't go into. You can only go into it on Guru Puja days, which is once a year in June, and apparently the lines, people start lining up the night before, so you can imagine how insane it is. So I thought, let me just pray for that. And when we got there, the doors were closed, and I said, no, I've prayed for this. Guruji will allow me some way to come in here. And I prayed to Babaji to help me get some darshan of the inside. And then what happened was a man came to just pay his respects at the door, and he saw us, and he started asking me questions in Hindi, saying where you're from, etc. And I said, we've come from London. And he said, oh, if you want to go inside, why don't you go speak to the Pandit that comes in and does puja every morning? And we thought, oh, we don't even know where he is. And he's like, oh, he lives in that lane, over that lane, in that lane. And I said, okay, fine. And then I tried to go that way, and it's like a maze. You wouldn't possibly find it. And then he started following me because he knew I was going to get lost. And then he took me all the way there. And then I went to the Pandit's house, and offered my respects. And he said, he was very graceful, and he said, you can't. I know why you're here, but I can't allow you. I can't allow you to gain entry into his home. And I said, well, we've come from so far. If you could just, on this one occasion, he said, do you know how many people ask me this? We have some very specific rules, and it's the family's wishes. And I said, okay, fine. And I said, at least tell me when you go, because I can wait outside and we can just take the ocean on the outside. He's like, no, I can't even tell you that. It can be at any time. I don't want to waste your time. You just meditate at home. That's the best thing you can do to be close to Lady Mahashai. And I said, okay, fine. I do meditate at home every day, but yes, I'll meditate even harder. And then, so then I went back and I told my wife, you should go speak to him, because he may be a bit more sympathetic to your ears, to your sound. And she tried, nothing was doing. So then we thought, okay, let's just do our practices outside his door. So we did. No, not the pundit's door. I'm outside Lady Mahashai's door.
Okay.
So
we are real yogis. We got this.
And so I was meditating.
I thought you were not taking no for an answer there.
Poor chap. So we were waiting out. We did not waiting out. We were just meditating outside. And interesting, there was some devotees from Chile. That were there, and they'd come every day. And they would like, no, we haven't been able to get in, and you can't go in. So then they'd been there for 2 hours, and then 5 minutes late, and after about 1.5 hours, they left. And then the Pandit came with another Pandit, and then they went into the house. And we were just there, and we were like, oh my God, these devotees from Chile had been here for so long. And so then they'd went in, and then we respectfully waited outside, but we saw the whole of the inside courtyard, and then we were meditating outside. We could hear them doing the prayers and the puja inside, and then we were just obviously meditating outside. We didn't want to ask to go in because we knew what he'd said. But then afterwards he came out and he gave us prasad from the offering that that had taken place. And I thought, oh, that's so much grace, isn't it? Babaji gave me more than I could have wanted, really, in that situation. And my perseverance was rewarded in some way.
Mm. Yes.
Wow.
Nice.
Right, that's quite a story. I love it when you tell stories, because I can almost imagine it when I'm listening. I only told 10% of that story, but I thought, oh my God, I've been talking for 5 minutes. Let me really summarize this. We were raptured by your story.
I'll tell you the rest of it when you come over in a couple of weeks. I'm having a big shindig at my house. Mike and Chris,
shindig.
We're gonna have shindig. Would Lauren to explain to non-British people what shindig means?
It's kind of like, well, to my understanding, it's like an event, but it's kind of like casual event with friends, like a shindig.
Yeah. So a lot of the young adults are coming over, and we're gonna have a kirtan and some meditation, and maybe go for a walk near my place.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, it'll be good. Okay, back to the book. So something very divine now takes place, because they find the secluded spot, and he says, Pratap, I will instruct you in the Kriya of Lahiri Mahashai, the greatest yogi of modern times. And then very interestingly, he says, his technique will be your guru. And I feel like this line is, it's important anyway, because he's just about to be given Kriya. And that in itself is, beyond words. But then I love it when Pratap came up to him and was like, you're my guru. And he never really said, oh, yes, I am your guru. And now he's saying here, well, actually, it's the technique that's your guru. Perhaps he's not saying it's not me, but in some ways he kind of is. He's saying, well, this technique is your guru.
And he's kind of saying that to all of us, isn't he?
Yeah.
Because he said, when I'm gone, the teachings will be the guru, isn't it? And this is essentially saying the same thing here. And I'm reminded that Brother Nandaboy said this actually in one of his talks. He said in the Sikh religion, they also have this thing where the teachings of the guru, and they take it to such an extent that where the holy, Granth Sahib, where it's written, where their teachings are written, that is the idol that they worship even. So not just the teachings, but they worship the idol, So imagine if we had that much reverence for the lessons.
I mean, in some ways, it is all that for us, right? Like we have the teachings, which is a bit more than just Kriya Yoga. We have all those writings, all those lessons, all those books. We have the monastics. So there's more, but it's at the end of the day, you're right, Brian. The teachings are the guru, and I guess in this case, there wouldn't have been an easy way for him to stay in touch with Pratap, right? He lives in a different city. That means of communication were different. I'm sure they exchanged addresses and were writing each other letters at times, but it is difficult if your guru is not really reachable. So then this makes sense. The technique will be a guru.
And the other reason I think he has to say this is because he's not yet at a level in this life where he is a guru. So we know later on when, after his self-realization and after he formally started taking the disciples after his monastic vows, etc., he became a guru, right? Physically, he wasn't shy about saying that he was the guru to his disciples, especially in the USA. And then when he was due to leave his form, that's when he started saying the teachings will be your guru. So this is presaging what was to come. But there was a time when he was in this form, when he was in the states of, self-realization and oneness with God, then he did take the form of the guru for all those tens of thousands of people, fortunate souls in the USA and India at the time.
But he's obviously of some spiritual advancement because he's able to initiate people into Kriya. As we know, that's not any old person can just give Kriya. So yeah, wow. I love that they did this at the side near the station, just somewhere. It's amazing. Yeah, so they said the initiation was concluded in half an hour. And he said, Kriya is your chintamani. And that means a mythological gem with power to grant desires, but it's also a name of God.
And described also as the philosopher's stone in the previous section, I think, potentially.
Yeah. And then, there might be some people listening, or it's just nice to hear it from Guruji, really, about what he then explained that Kriya was. And it's actually nice to read it in this way. It doesn't go too in depth, but it's just enough that we kind of can understand what it's about. Chris, would you mind reading most of it, please?
Sure. The technique, which, as you see, is simple, embodies the art of quickening man's spiritual evolution. Hindu scriptures teach that the incarnating ego requires 1 million years to obtain liberation from Maya. This natural period is greatly shortened through Kriya Yoga. Just as a plant growth can be accelerated far beyond its normal rate, as Jagadish Chandra Bose has demonstrated, so man's physiological development also can be speeded by scientific means.
And then, I like this last sentence that he says is for all of us. What does he say, Priyank?
Be faithful in your practice. You will approach the guru of all gurus. I really love this section that Chris read out because later on we have a whole chapter on this. So this is like give a crash course intro, intro to the colossal volume that's about to unfold on us later. And then as we become lesson students, it becomes even vaster. And then as we become Kriya Bandhs, it becomes vaster still. So it's like step by step, and this is probably the second step. The first step was you opening the book and getting to this stage. And this is the next step where he's describing everything here, actually, in these 5 or 6 lines.
Yeah, it just gets deeper and deeper, doesn't it? Much like God. So yeah, and then Pratap sort of says, he's transported to find this, and it's got an unshackling effect on my sensory bonds, will free me for higher spheres. And I feel like that again, it just gives us that little bit more about what Kriya is all about without really saying too much.
But that must have been pretty advanced to say lines such as this, isn't it? Because I can imagine if I was there, I wouldn't be able to come up with any cohesive sentence in response to having having Kriya initiation from a boy who you knew to be your guru from a past incarnation. But going back to what Chris said, one of the lines was, the just as plant growth can be accelerated far beyond its normal rate, as J.C. both had demonstrated. Now here we get, I think, why he placed so much emphasis on J.C. Bose's chapter, which came before this, a couple before this, because he's showing us the practical and the metaphysical comparison to, influencing plants, to how then we can influence the human plant through Kriya. And the human plant is an apt way of putting it, because Luther Burbank, who he dedicated the Autobiography of a Yogi to, at least the Western editions. I noticed the Indian edition is actually dedicated to Sri Yukteswar, so seems to change. But anyway, so Luther Burbank, who a saint amidst roses, we'll get to a bit later in the book, or a lot later in the book, probably about in 2 years' time. He's got a very lovely book called The Human Plant.
And if it just reminds us that it's scientific for anyone that might be reading and thinking, we know what it's all about. It's a scientific technique, and it works. And just like the plants, human plant. Yeah, you're right, Priyank. And then it says here, we sat a while in silent understanding. And I love this. I don't know whether anyone's noticed this, but it's something that I've noticed that, since getting Kriya, there's this understanding between Kriya bands that I can't quite explain with words. But it's that shared sort of, and when you say, when you share with someone, another fellow Kriya band that, you have received Kriya and you're practicing Kriya, there's this look and it's this shared feeling. You can't quite put it into words, but it's got that feel. Yeah.
I wonder your first reaction to this, maybe Lauren, you specifically, to reading this for the first time, because I do remember how I felt at the time, and I wonder if it was remotely similar to what you felt. But when it says, man's psychological development, that it takes 1 million years to obtain liberation, I actually felt excitement. There's something that stirred my soul to be excited, like really, really excited. And as you said, Frank, like this is just a taster to, I think it's chapter 26, isn't it? When it goes into more detail on this, whatever this is, that my soul kind of, lifted, brightened, said, this is the key. This is, if you want to know the theory of it, like this is it. So sort of itches something in the mind as well, but the song enlivened when I first read this.
The other thing to note was that they shared a moment of silence, and we're obviously cataloging these moments of silence, and we're calling them interiority moments. So this is the 10th such moment in the book, equally important as the others. Some of the others where you'll remember when Mukunda's father and mother are having their interaction is the police officer, Swami Pranavananda, Shastri Mahashai when he was reflecting on the time with his guru, the Tiger Swami when he had his moments of realization and remoteness when he was referring to his guru, God, Master Mahashai, and when Guruji met Sri Yukteswar as well. So this is the 10th moment. Still looking for a good place to catalogue these.
I love that you're cataloguing them. It's very
Yeah.
inspiring.
But yeah, I totally get what you're saying, Lauren, with the terms of words do not do justice for some forms or some communication that's happening.
Yeah. And on that note, it is the end of that section. So we will pause there until next week when we carry on the chapter. Is it carry on? Yes, we do carry on chapter, last part. So yes, we'll see you all then. Thank you so much, everyone, for a lovely episode, and we'll see you next time.